At number 10 spot, we have the Palmer House Hotel. In Sauk Centre, Minnesota lies the Palmer House Hotel. This hotel stands on the grounds of the city's first hotel, named the Sauk Centre Hotel, which ended up burning down in June 1900. When the Palmer House was built the next year in 1901 by Christina and Ralph Palmer, it served as a shelter for distant travelers and a meeting place for many of the locals of the town. However, every single year there would be more and more reports of strange occurrences happening inside of the hotel. Guests and staff alike would initially notice cold spots associated with the feeling of dread, as well as doors closing on their own, but eventually various people would report disembodied voices and tugs from the ghost of a little boy seen running in the hallways. This place was investigated by American paranormal television series The Dead Files, and during the investigation, psychic medium Amy Allen confronted a dark presence attempting to take control of her physical being. The room with the most activity is said to be room 22, where this one lady says that she made contact with a ghost child named Thomas, but you can book any other rooms if you don't want to encounter a ghost. Your choice. At a number 9 spot, we have the Kensington Runestone. This slab of stone looking like straight out of the Bible was allegedly found somewhere in central Minnesota during 1898. It was found by Olaf Oman, who was a Swedish archaeologist who found it after removing a tree in his farm. The stone had Viking runes, and one of the texts read the year 1362, which ultimately suggested that Scandinavians arrived in North America 130 years before Christopher Columbus did in 1492. The text talks about a journey to discover the Vinland, which is considered to be North America, and considering it was found in Minnesota, it seems like they completed their task. So is this finally solid evidence to suggest that someone discovered America before Columbus? Well, not really. Many people believe this is a great big hoax, especially considering the fact that the family who discovered it had a book about runic scripts. And when more research was done, the language used inside of the stone was pretty modern. However, if this was true, this would be very groundbreaking news. At number 8 spot, we have Dead Man's Trail. The small town of Thief River Falls in northern Minnesota is known for two major rivers, the Red Lake and the Thief. These two rivers meet up within the town, and during the early years, it affected a lot of the development within the town. Many native tribes would battle for the land, with eventually the Ojibwa coming out on top and forcing the Dakota tribe out of the area. After years of conflict, this town eventually started to have more reports of the supernatural, with the most being reported during a hike in the Dead Man Trail. One story goes that the trail was being used as a hiding spot for a man wanted for murder, while another story talks about a Native American woman who was trying to escape from people chasing her. She ran as fast as she could, but her newborn baby would just slow her down, causing her to hide the baby beside the river. When she went back to get the infant, she discovered it had been carried away from the river. Hikers have reported witnessing her ghostly apparition, hunting for her infant to this day. At number 7 spot, we have the Mounds Theater. Built in 1922, this theater was once used as a venue for live entertainment and silent movies. While it had many good moments, there are many accidents inside of the theater. However, there are no reported deaths inside. Eventually, it would get closed down in 1967, then reopened once again in 2001. This little mix of accidents with abandonment is the perfect recipe for ghosts to live in, and this is the case made by many staff and visitors of the theater. Late night workers and janitors have reported being physically grabbed by a ghost, and others report a ghost named Red who throws things at women, and also a young girl has been reported wearing a pink dress bouncing a ball on stage when no one else is around. At number 6 spot, we have the Lake Pepin Serpent. Here comes another iteration of the Loch Ness Monster that lurks to depths below the US. Introducing the Pepe Monster, or PP Monster, whatever floats your boat, but I guarantee this beast won't. As it's mentioned from the name, this beast is located in Lake Pepin, which is basically the border between the states of Wisconsin and Minnesota. This monster became more popular in the media after businessman Larry Nielsen offered a $50,000 reward for finding this creature. After years, no one has had solid evidence of the creature. But Larry himself is convinced it exists out there and only wants to pay the money to see the creature one last time again. This is because 11 years ago, before he put the bounty out, he spotted a quote 200 feet long and 2 feet high creature going upstream. In the hump of our list, we have the Wendigo. This devil of a creature is a well-known one to many, but many don't know that the first original sightings of the Wendigo happened in the state of Minnesota. Wendigos are said to be as tall as 15 feet and very slender-like. However, don't be deceived. Because because they are said to be very strong monsters that have a never-ending desire to eat and kill humans. The legend states that a person can become a Wendigo if they decide to take part in cannibalism or any other heinous acts of humanity. These bad deeds essentially turn you into this monster, and this creature can possess you and even turn you into one itself if the person is greedy or weak enough. There are multiple myths talking about what Wendigos look like, but majority of them describe them to look like an animal but very tall, with a skull as a head, long legs, and their whole body covered in hair and drenched in blood. They are also said to be very fast and have super hearing with an amazing sense of smell, and in some cases they are said to walk on water, but they're not Jesus, remember. So be very cautious next time you try to camp in the forests of Minnesota. At number 4 spot, we have Crazy Annie's Bridge. 95 miles out of Rochester, Minnesota is a bridge known as Crazy Annie's Bridge, and it's also said to be one of the most haunted bridges in all of America. According to hauntedhopeville.com, this bridge is located in Henderson, Minnesota on 270th Street, just in case you guys want to take a quick visit. But I guarantee that's probably not the best idea. This bridge in particular is said to be haunted by a mother named Annie, who was reportedly from the early 1900s. Story goes that Annie lived in the area during the time of World War I. She fell in love with a man and started a family with 3 kids. But eventually the man would end up going overseas to fight in the war. And unfortunately, after months, the man would never end up returning. This is when the woman would go insane and eventually take her 3 children and drown them in this nearby bridge. And ever since, it's said that you can hear the cries of all 3 children and even the mother on the bridge if you decide to go on it in the middle of the night. Number 3, Hibbing High School. Hibbing High in Minnesota is not your typical average school building. Here, the staircases are marble, the railings are brass, and the art walls hold the whole almost medieval design together. The auditorium was modeled after the Capitol Theater, which is a sight in and itself. And when Bob Dylan was still Robert Zimmerman and a student at Hibbing High, he performed on the auditorium stage during a talent show. But even with star performers and a stunning design, it's a lone seat inside of the auditorium that attracts the most attention from everyone. The story goes that the first stage manager named Bill was employed at the school from 1927 to the late 1960s when he passed away after a chandelier fell on his head. Rumors soon arose that Bill really never left his favorite seat in the theater named J47. In the early 90s, Chuck Perry, who at the point had been stage manager since 1979, took a series of photographs of the auditorium after a woman reported feeling a cold chill as soon as she walked around J47 row. And lo and behold, one of the photographs taken with the Polaroid camera showed a man sitting in J47 wearing formal clothes and a top hat, and you could reportedly see right through him. So is this ghost? Who knows? At number 2 spot, we have the Hairy Man of Vergas Trail. In west central Minnesota, in a small town named Vergas, is the tale of the Hairy Man legend. And no, we're not talking about some random dad who happened to have a little too much hair on their back. This legend has existed in the region for the past 6 decades, and that's only because the reports are not done happening, and every single year it seems like there's a new experience with the Hairy Man of Vergas Trail. The man is described as being 8 feet tall, having long hair, smelling like complete garbage, and always walking barefoot. In other words, you would probably think this guy was a more civilized Bigfoot than anything else. Many believed he was just an old homeless man living in the woods and didn't want anyone near his land. However, the Hairy Man gained more notoriety after a man named Ken Zitzaw returned back from driving in the woods with dents in his car hood. He claimed it was the Hairy Man. Others have reported other attacks regarding the Hairy Man, but in the end, it's not confirmed if he really exists or not, or if he's just a figment of our imagination. At number 1 spot, we have the Glen Sheen Mansion. Minnesota's most notorious killing occurred at the Glen Sheen Mansion in Duluth. Elizabeth Condon, the heiress who inherited the home, was murdered in her bed in 1977. The body of her nurse was discovered on the Great Staircase, and the home, which is now held by the University of Minnesota Duluth, is said to be the most haunted in the state. After hours, employees have heard screaming, and some claim to see a white lady dressed in really dark clothing wandering throughout the entire mansion. At a number 10 spot, we have the Torch Lake Monster. This one is pretty much well known all over Michigan, but for those who don't know, the tale of the Torch Lake Monster dates back to the early 1960s and 70s. Obviously, it takes place in Torch Lake, which is located in North Michigan, and it also is the 2nd largest lake in the state. A fisherman and coach by the name of Dave Foley is credited with spotting the creature first and telling the story stories of it since he worked by the lake for a while. Legend goes that the giant creature has a lizard's body, the head of a cat, one brown eye, and one blue eye, along with slimy green skin. The lake is approximately 285 feet deep, which makes what lies underneath much more scary and worrisome. Nighttime is when this creature is said to arise from the depths. At this time, many swimmers and boats go missing, only to wash ashore with no evidence of its demise. At a number 9 spot, we have the singing sands of Beat Gris. Located just past Lac La Belle, Michigan, is a beautiful white sandy beach known as Beat Gris. In a direct translation, this means gray beast, and that's because a large gray creature was said to have inhabited the area many years ago, but that's not even the story I'm going to talk about. Local legends claim that the pure white sand of the beach sings by pressing down your palms on it, or it barks when you strike it. The sound is said to be the voice of a Native American maiden who lost her lover when he drowned in the Great Lakes, and now she calls him on shore. The sand is said to lose its magical singing power when it's removed from the beach. Now visitors claim to hear the singing sounds, but as many try to bring the sound back home, they are met with years of unlimited bad luck, which lead many to bring it back to the beach to allow it to sing again. Other than sand that makes sounds, at a number 8 spot with the Belle Isle's Lady in White. In Detroit, Michigan, there's an island called Belle Isle. This 982-acre island is used for picnics, hikes, and home of the only marble lighthouse. Other than that, everything else on this island is shrouded in mystery and up for speculation. Legend of the island follows the story of a chief's daughter and a haunting bridge. The chief was concerned that his daughter's beauty would attract vast amounts of suitors, so to combat this, he made a deal with the snake goddess of the island. The chief asked the goddess to protect his daughter. The goddess would agree, but not for nothing. She would ask for the daughter to live out the rest of her days on the island to protect it, never being able to leave it. And to this day, the daughter is said to stay on this island and walk it, with many visitors reporting that she would try to lure them into the forest by telling them that she is looking for someone and just needs help. She supposedly takes her victims to the bridge to drown them, and it's said that if you go on this bridge and honk 3 times, she will appear just before your eyes. At number 7 spot with the Nain Rouge. It's said that since the city of Detroit was founded in Michigan, bad luck has befallen the area. This is all because of the devilish red imp known as the Nain Rouge had cursed the entire city. Local folklore suggests that the Detroit's founder, Antoine de la Mothe Cadillac, was warned by a fortune teller that he would come face to face with the Nain Rouge and to treat him with the utmost respect and attention. Except this information came straight this ear and right out the other, because when he finally met with this creature, he hit it with his crane and told it to stay out of his way. This is when the angry Nain Rouge cursed the city of Detroit and Cadillac. Shortly after this, Cadillac would lose his fortune and move back to France, but misfortune still occurred in the city. It's said that in all the disastrous events that happened in Detroit, the Nain Rouge could be spotted just before all of them. For example, in 1763, 50 British soldiers perished from Native Americans, after which the Nain Rouge could be seen dancing in the aftermath in joy. Then in the surrender of the war in 1812, the Nain was blamed again for its presence. It also been seen during Detroit's riots of 1967 and 1976's ice storm that caused electricity to go out for days. At a number 6 spot with the Masonic Temple. Currently standing as the largest Masonic temple in the world, it also stands as one of the most haunted places in all of Michigan. The temple, designed by George D. Mason, is an imposing Gothic structure at the corner of Bagg Street, later Temple Street, and 2nd Avenue across from Cass Park. The temple has over 1,000 rooms, secret stairways, and concealed passages, but unfortunately Mason would go a little too far in this construction, where it would cause him to go bankrupt, eventually losing his wife in the process. His depression slowly kicked in, and then he would jump off the roof of this temple to his death. And to this day, security guards claim to see old George's ghost climbing those steps to the rooftop. Visitors also reported many noises such as doors and windows being slammed shut. They also see moving shadows and experience cold spots all around the area, all while feeling as if they're being watched by something. Right in the hub of our list, we have the Michigan Triangle. Well, guess Michigan has their own version of Bermuda's Devil Triangle, and it contains just as much unexplained phenomena as Bermuda. The triangle goes from Manawak, Wisconsin to Ludington to Benton Harbor in Michigan. It was in early spring 1937 when Captain Donner was just managing his freighter ship called the O.S. McFarland through these icy waters. He was so tired, so he decided to go to sleep and asked for one of the crewmates to wake him up when they approached shore. As they did, they noticed his room was locked, so they looked around, but nothing. They then kicked the door down and found that he vanished with no signs whatsoever. Now the triangle claims the lives of many ships and planes just like Bermuda. People have also cited the O.S. McFarland, but as they try to get a closer look, it disappears into the waters. An odd thing about this place is when divers go to check the wreckages of ships and planes, they notice that everything is still intact. including the bodies of the deceased and the ship as a whole. This is by far the scariest triangle because there is no way around it other than land. So basically there's no point in traveling in Michigan's Great Lakes. At our number 4 spot is Hell's Bridge. Back in the early 1900s, an old deranged man named Elias Friss led a group of kids to the bridge and proceeded to murder each and every single one of them, slowly throwing them into the river below. Eventually he was caught and hung by the towns. Before he passed away, he made a confession claiming that he did this because he was possessed by the devil and they told him to do it. To this day, a lot of visitors to the bridge hear the screams and the cries from the children just before they pass away. People have also said that when they get home from this place, they find bruises on their body as if someone was reaching out to grab them or hit them. The worst part is that if you walk on this bridge at night, you can feel hands below you as if they're grabbing you from the river below. And at the end of the bridge, you might encounter Elias as a dark figure with glowing eyes, so you won't miss him in the dead of night. In more lesser known news, apparently you're able to sell your soul to the devil by meeting the devil in the middle of this bridge. I mean, it's called Hell's Bridge. What else did we expect? At our number 3 spot, we have the Dogman. The Dogman is described as a 7-foot tall, amber-eyed, bipedal, canine-like creature, and he has the head of a dog with the body and torso of a human. Ever since its original sighting in 1887, many more sightings were spotted all over Michigan. It's primarily spotted in the northwestern quadrant of the Lower Peninsula. Back to its original sighting back in 1887. This is when the Dogman was discovered by 2 lumberjacks who saw this creature in the distance. Things got a little more concerning when in 1937, Robert Forney was attacked by 5 wild dogs, describing that of one of the dogs allegedly stood up like a bipedal and was significantly larger than all the other dogs. This legend got more popular when disc jockey Steve Cook recorded a song called The Legend, which describes the Michigan's Dogman. Although the artist claims it was made for an April Fool's joke, this kickstarted the entire legend and sightings of the Dogman would only rise after the song was released. At a number 2 spot with Melonhead. Locals fear of humanoids called the Melonheads. First theorized in the 1970s, Melonheads are said to be completely bald with misshapen bulbous heads, deformed arms and legs, teeth like daggers, and luminous red eyes. Legend goes that Melonheads reside around Felt Mansion, which is home to Dora Felt, who is an American inventor. The Melonheads were said to be the children suffering from hydrocephalus, which causes your head to expand in some cases. They were located at the Junction Insane Asylum near the home, and it's said that they endured months and months of abuse, and that one day they decided to escape and run into the forests of Michigan, where they became animal-like and very feral. Many of these Melonheads are said to be looking for the doctor who failed to care for them in order to take his life. At a number 1 spot, we have Alois Psychiatric Hospital. Located in Westland, Michigan, it was named after Detroit's postmaster Alois Davik. In 1839, it started as a poorhouse and a farm where the poor, the sick, and the needy would go for shelter and work. As time went on, the poorhouse transitioned into a psychiatric asylum and hospital. The buildings were self-sufficient, even having their own police. They were even one of the first hospitals in the world to use x-rays for diagnosis, so at least one good thing came out of here. At its peak, the place housed over 10,000 patients and over 2,000 staff members. After its closure in 1984, the hospital's abandoned grounds are said to have a few patients still left inside of it. Ghost patients, that is. There have been reports of people finding medical waste and other strange items. Some have reported finding jars containing human body parts, as well as documents outlining strange medical procedures. At number 10 spot, we have the Phantom Hitchhiker of Black Horse Lake. Near the city of Great Falls in Cascade County is a tale about a very notorious yet mysterious hitchhiker. If you happen to be coming off of Highway 87 going down Fort Benton, you may encounter a man on the side of the road at night. The area is very flat, so the man is very easy to spot when you're driving down this road. But unlike other people on the side of the roads, this person isn't looking to get a ride. Instead, once your car gets closer, the person is reported to roll over the hood of your car, across the windshield of the vehicle, as if they had been struck. As people begin to check on the man after they hit, they realize that they had hit nothing and the person they previously saw just disappeared. Over the years, there have been hundreds of reports that claim the same thing. They drive on this road, then they hit a man, only to find out it was nothing. Many believe this is the spirit of a Native American man who got struck and killed on this road. However, there's still no written document on it. At number 9 spot, we have Sacrifice Cliff. Overlooking Billings, Montana is Sacrifice Cliff. Despite the breathtaking views and scenic paths, this place has a very dark history attached to it. I mean, you probably already know that just by the name alone. Story goes that this cliff was once a peaceful meditation spot for the men of the Crow tribe. When they arrived here, they would be in complete silence, which showed the amount of respect they had for the area. However, a smallpox outbreak hit the area, causing the majority of the Crow tribe to perish within days. So one day, some of the boys returned to their homes from Sacrifice Cliff, only to discover that their entire village, including their family members, had all passed away from smallpox. They were so distraught they didn't see a point in living, so the boys decided to sacrifice themselves over this cliff. They would return back to the cliff with their horses. Then they would proceed to blindfold the horse and then ride off these very cliffs to their deaths. Although this is a very sad tale, if you decide to visit this place at night, you may hear the sound of these horses as if they're falling from the cliff to this day. At number 8 spot, we have Flathead Lake Monster. Lurking in Flathead Lake is said to be a monster that closely resembles the Loch Ness Monster. But hey, I swear every place has their own version of it, so here's Montana's version. For those who don't know, Flathead Lake is situated northeast Montana, just in case you guys wanted to avoid this place for your next swim. Many visit this lake for its unprecedented beauty, but since 1889, there's been reports coming in the boatloads about this creature. It's described as a very large eel-like creature that moves around like a snake and is as long as 40 feet. Many say its head is shaped like a bowling ball with multiple humps on its back. No wonder people think this is the Loch Ness Monster. It all started in 1889 when James C. Kerr was making rounds across the lake when he and his passengers discovered this creature. They described it as a whale-like from its sheer size alone. Ever since, there's been hundreds of sightings, but who really knows what lies underneath the depths of this lake? At number 7 spot, we have the Alberta Bear Theater. Located in Billings, Montana as well, is the famous Alberta Bear Theater. The theater was originally named the Fox Theater, but in 1987, the theater was renamed the Alberta Bear Theater in honor of his daughter, Alberta. And this 1,400-seat theater was like any other. It was beautiful on the inside, which housed many professional touring companies and various performing artists. However, most visitors and workers claim to see the same two spirits lurking inside of the theater. This includes one male entity and one female. The male is described as wanting to be noticed, out of sorts, and very possessive, while the female is described as being very benign and very friendly. So let's talk about the guy. It's said that he is the spirit of a past employee who took his own life at the theater, which keeps him there trapped for eternity. So if you guys are looking to come to this theater, be on the lookout for these two. At number 6 spot, we have the Garnet Ghost Town in Coloma. Coloma, Montana is known as the Mystery Camp and is a ghost town located a few miles north of the better known Garnet Ghost Town on the Garnet-Back County Byway. Very little is known about the Coloma settlement other than records indicating that it began in 1893 and experienced high gold mining activity starting in 1896. But by the 1940s, the mines had completely run out and the boom went bust. Eventually, the place would be emptied out and be left abandoned, and this is where many locals claim that the spirits ended up taking over the place. One state historian claims that once the sun sets in Garnet, the spirits of the town historic's residents come alive. Ellen Baumler, the Montana Historical Society's resident ghost whisperer and author, wrote, quote, "At midnight, people have heard ghostly fingers striking piano keys with the music floating across the empty buildings." She continued saying, quote, "Especially during the winter months, visitors see visions and hear unearthly noises. They cause no trouble, and anyone who visits the deserted town in the dead of winter should be prepared to meet them. They hide in the shadows, laugh in the wind, and come out when you least expect them." Right in the hub of our list, we have Bear Canyon. Mashed in between Chestnut Mountain and Mount Ellis is a beautiful stretch of land known as Bear Canyon. It's best known for its scenic hiking trail and is one of the most popular sites in the Bozeman area. And as we all know, a place that is beautiful on the outside is usually hiding something very dark on the inside. According to the Bozeman Paranormal Society, Bear Canyon is a place for spirits and not for humans. Sightings of the paranormal have been recorded since the late 1800s, which is ever since we started to settle inside of that piece of land. Many people have reported seeing a little girl who attempts to lead them off of the trail and into the woods. The little girl targets women, and for those who follow this girl, they will find themselves lost in the middle of the canyon. Others claim to have seen a strange mist on Bear Canyon Road, and many have gone missing when they enter inside of this strange mist. Number 4, Moss Mansion. Built in 1903, this red brick mansion was a turn-of-the-century home. It was 3 stories tall with 28 different rooms inside. The mansion was built for the Moss family, who treated it like their pride and their joy. Eventually, they would have around 6 children and 3 servants occupying the home. Years went by and all was good, until they suffered their first devastating loss. Just 5 years after the house was built, the youngest child named Virginia passed away while she was only 6 years old. Then 40 years later, in 1947, the dad, Preston B. Moss, passed away from a heart attack. Then soon after followed the wife, who passed away from a cerebral hemorrhage. Then 30 years later, another one of the sons named Melville passed away in 1984. This family ended up inhabiting the home from 1903 all the way until 1984. So best believe their deaths in the home have some sort of effect. The mansion has now been turned into a museum, and many visitors report various paranormal activity. Some include a ghostly female voice singing in the billiards room, and many staff members report a cool wind that goes up and around their bodies as they walk through the halls of the mansion. At number 3, we have Bannock Ghost Town. When gold was discovered along Grasshopper Creek in Bannock, Montana, the town went from a ghost town to a blooming community. Following the economic growth, a man named Henry Plummer became the sheriff of the town and the leader of a gang known as the Innocents. Plummer's gang is linked to over 100 murders and robberies, and during his brief time as sheriff, Plummer erected the Bannock Gallows, only to be hanged from them himself after being apprehended by a group of vigilantes. Bannock State Park still has the gallows, but many people who have visited claim that there's too much negative energy and supernatural activity in that specific area. Many claim to even see the spirit of Henry Plummer himself, as he's said to be still pleading for his life. At number 2 spot, we have Little Bighorn Battlefield. The Battle of Little Bighorn occurred on 1876 in the grassy plains of Bighorn River Valley and bluffs that exist around and along the Bighorn River. This was where General Custer and his men were brutally and completely defeated by the Sioux and Cheyenne warriors led by Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull. So best believe a place like this has a few restless spirits. I mean, every battlefield has one. You guys should know this. Visitors and employees have reported strange noises and even seeing full-fledged apparitions of soldiers after dark. Now, near the battlefield cemetery is where the most activity is said to happen. Many visitors claim to have been consumed by the feeling of deep sorrow and loss when they walk the cemetery grounds. And the stone house, which was built in 1894 for the cemetery's caretakers, is home to some of the most terrifying ghost stories. Some include lights aggressively flickering on and off until you leave the home, and others report seeing soldiers with missing limbs such as missing heads or legs, indicating some of the injuries they went through during the war. At number 1 spot, we have Dude Rancher Lodge. Built in 1940 by Annabelle and Percival Goen, the Dude Rancher Lodge was originally constructed using salvaged bricks from the old St. Vincent's Hospital. The couple ran the hotel together until 1962, where Percival passed away after a car accident. Annabelle continued to run the hotel on her own, though slowly her health began to decline. She lived in an apartment at the hotel and was cared for by her dedicated staff until eventually she was moved to a nursing home. Then on February 2nd, 1983, Annabelle passed away. Since her passing, this lodge has had too many supernatural activities to count. This includes televisions turning on and off while the housekeepers are cleaning the room, knocking on the doors when no one is on the other side, the sound of children running in the halls with no children being present, and a mysterious female voice was even caught on audio tape in the basement of the hotel. If you ever wanted to stay here, then try to avoid rooms 223, 224, and especially 226, which is said to be Annabelle's grandson's room, who took his own life in that room. Coming in at number 10 spot, we have Trollwood Park. In Fargo, North Dakota is the Trollwood Park. And at first glance, it really looks like your typical park, but that should all change once you realize it was built directly on top of a cemetery and former asylum. Obviously, those who built the park knew of this and already planned to move many of the bodies away, but it's confirmed that they didn't manage to take out all of them. As briefly mentioned, the Cass County Hospital was built on top of the park around 1895, and over the years, many people were left buried with no tombstones or even a marking of their location, which is why many remain in this park to this day. One notorious ghost that haunts the area is a woman wearing a blue dress that dances around the willow trees, and other visitors here claim that the ghosts here like to call out names in order to get people to lay them to rest finally. And oddly enough, in one instance, erosion caused one of the graves to resurface, causing one visitor to trip on real human bones. Imagine you're just playing in a playground only to stumble upon century-old human bones. At the number 9 spot with the Mini Washitu. The Dakota tribe has talked about a river monster named the Mini Washitu that has terrorized the Missouri River since the beginning of time. This creature is a 7 to 8 feet tall bipedal with bison-like fur, one eye like a cyclops, and a single horn above that one eye, and it also has a very spiny backbone. This creature wasn't known for its bloodthirsty tendencies or even its power. Instead, those who have seen the creature ended up just going crazy, and the only way for them to feel any sort of peace is death. One man wrote about this creature saying that he spotted it upstream in the Missouri River. He said it was red in color with hair like buffalo, but when he saw it, everything went dark. And the last thing he wrote was that he was walking home, but when he arrived, he lost all sort of reason and passed away in a couple of minutes. Kinda sounds like the Netflix movie Bird Box, doesn't it? So best to keep your blindfolds with you in North Dakota. At a number 8 spot, we have the Stairway to Hell. Yup, if you're looking for a direct way to hell, this place might be for you. Jokes aside, located in Tegas, North Dakota is what many claim to be the Stairway to Hell. And with a claim like that, there must be something very terrifying about it. The town of Tegas is now completely abandoned, but when it opened up in the early 1900s, some crazy things happened here. There were rumors of an old Lutheran church that specialized in satanic worship, and some even claim that they did real human sacrifices here. Although the location of the church is not exactly known, what is known that it has been partially burned down, but there is still some who claim to have found it. They say the church is marked with an upside down cross at the front, and apparently everyone who has come down to the basement has never come back up. Now it has claimed so many lives that people started to think it was a stairway to hell. But hey, I guess the only way to find out about this is to walk it down yourself. Are you interested? At number 7 spot, we're the Sandhaven Sanatorium. The Sandhaven Sanatorium, otherwise known as a Sanatorium of Death, was built in 1911, and ever since, it has been a hot spot for paranormal investigators due to the dark history attached to the place. When the place was active, much of it was used to treat those with tuberculosis, and the issue is that the cure didn't come until 1946, which gave around 30 years of deaths due to this illness. Eventually, the need for the sanatorium died down, and the place ended up closing in 1989. After being repurchased, it was found that over 1,000 people passed away inside of the sanatorium, with the majority of them being in unmarked graves. To make matters worse, many satanic worshippers has made their way here to perform rituals using pentagrams and even sacrifice. Eventually, ghost adventures made their way here as well, and even spoke with another spirit inside of the property. Others believe that patients of this place were badly mistreated, which could give more reason to all these hauntings. At a number 6 spot, we have Devil's Lake. When you get a name like this, you can't be surprised if anything bad happens to you here. The thing most people worry about when they step foot into this water is the Devil's Lake monster. The legend goes that centuries ago, many Siletz Indians vanished into the lake after their vessel was pulled down by giant tentacles. When the first Christian missionaries arrived in the Lincoln City area, local Native Americans told them of an octopus-like creature that appeared during periods of long drought. They even host a festival every single year for this creature, and back in those days, they used to sacrifice various animals into the lake. But obviously that's not done now. But as with any other sea monster, this creature still remains a huge mystery because in some accounts, people describe it as a Loch Ness monster lookalike, but in others, people lay claim that it resembles a large giant octopus or something like the Kraken. In the Humphrey list, we have White Lady Lane. Sometime in the early 20th century in the town of Walhalla, there was a 16-year-old girl named Anna Story who met with a much older man named Samuel Khalil, who was out selling items in the marketplace. As soon as Samuel saw Anna, he fell deeply in love and went straight to the mother to ask for permission to be with her daughter. Since there was a huge age gap and the fact that the daughter was only 16 years old, the mother denied any sort of romantic relationship. However, she made an offer, which was to allow her to use all of Sam's items, and in a year's time, she would grant him the permission he wanted. Samuel agreed and gave the mother much of his valuable items. Then we fast forward a year, and Samuel comes back to the town of Walhalla to settle his deal and get the daughter. However, when he confronted Anna's mother, she still denied and wouldn't even give back the items she borrowed. So in a rage, Samuel pushed the mother aside and took the daughter, but there was an immediate struggle. So he grabbed his firearm, shot Anna point blank, killing her immediately. Sam would then try to end his own life and the mother's, but was unsuccessful and was later arrested. Now locals claim that Anna's spirit can be found on White Lady Lane, wearing the same white nightgown the night she was murdered. At number 4 spot, we have Chateau de Moore. The Chateau de Moore in Medora, North Dakota is a very historical site here. First, it was built by Marquis de Moore back in 1883 for a hunting lodge. He, his wife Medora, and their children lived in the house for many years with no issues, until one day Medora decided to go out traveling and never ended up returning back. Ever since that occasion, the family was terrorized by her spirit to the point when they had to move out of the hunting lodge altogether. And you can still visit the home, and much of the family's belongings are still found inside, which led many people to believe that Medora's spirit is still inside the home as well. This is because various visitors claim that a voice is telling them to get out of the house, while others recall that the house is filled with all sorts of unexplained cold spots. At our number 3 spot, we have the Stack Monster. In Bismarck, North Dakota lies the infamous Liberty Memorial Building. It was originally built in 1924 and is the oldest building on the Capitol grounds. More specifically, the library inside of the building is where many have had strange occurrences. This is because it's said that the library is haunted by a creature known as the Stack Monster. This monster would flicker lights, push people into harm's way, and overnight workers have claimed to hear very loud footsteps in the library when no one else is around. And these hauntings aren't specific to humans only. One time, the former director of the State Historical Society came into the library with his dog, only to see his dog's hair stand up, and it couldn't stop barking at a dark section of the library. At a number 2 spot, we have the NDSU campus. 2 NDSU residence halls are said to be haunted by different spirits. First, we have the ghost of a man who hung himself on a heating pipe within Sarah's Hall. As well, students have mentioned everything from lights going out on entire levels to sensing an odd presence nearby. The 2 areas with the most paranormal activity here are the basement and the 3rd floor. When people enter the basement of the Sarah's Hall, there have been numerous accounts of people who feel a strange feeling of panic and a triggering fight or flight response when they enter. On the other end, we have the Menard Hall, and legend states that one morning after a school dance, a janitor found the bodies of 2 students in the dance room. The case ended up going cold, which is kinda ironic since students who enter this hall report that there are far too many cold spots for it to be considered normal. At number 1 spot, we have the Riverside Cemetery. Opening in 1878, this cemetery, located alongside the Red River in South Fargo, is the largest and oldest cemetery in North Dakota. And this place is possibly the only cemetery where you may hear voices coming from the tombstones. As the number of paranormal occurrences increased at the cemetery, ghost hunters came in and have apparently recorded what sounds like knocking near the doors to several mausoleums. Other visitors have reported that they've seen bizarre, unexplained mist, orbs, and even different strange anomalies that appeared in photos and videos of the area. So if you ever want to see it, go search for a YouTube video of this place and you probably will see why it's haunted.
Starting out this countdown at number 10, Spirit Lake origins. Spirit Lake's name is said to be no mystery to those who live in Idaho. The story goes that years ago, a young Native American woman began a relationship with a brave man from a rival tribe. Unable to wed but determined to preserve their doomed love, the two tied their wrists together in symbolic marriage and jumped from a cliff into the lake where others tend to go to take their lives. It's said that on the moonlit nights you can see their shadowy spirits drifting across the lake in a phantom canoe while mournful sounds fill the air as the Indian lovers seek release from their watery grave. Now here at number 9, Coyote and the Seven Devils. The Seven Devils form a portion of the Idaho-Oregon border, as well as line the most treasured river canyon called Hell's Canyon. The Nez Perce in particular had origin stories for nearly every feature of Idaho's diverse landscape, and the story of the Seven Devils is a unique one. Many years ago, there were 7 child-eating giant brothers who lived on the horizon. The people were terrified of these giants. They sent word to Coyote to help them defeat the giants and save their children. Coyote knew he couldn't battle 7 giants at once, so he dug massive holes in the earth and filled them with boiling liquid. As the giants were traveling east to snatch more children, they tripped into the holes and were trapped. Coyote was then able to transform the giants into stone, and he opened up a canyon at their feet to keep them from ever reaching the villages again. Coming in at number 8, Idaho doesn't exist. According to dozens of web pages which have genuinely called into question the very existence of Idaho as a physical location, the gem state simply doesn't exist, people say. People say it's down to 3 premises. Do you know anybody from Idaho? Have you ever been to Idaho? Do you know anyone who's ever been to Idaho? For most, the answer is no. Therefore, that's why people say Idaho doesn't exist. In fact, the general consensus is that Idaho was put on the map because cartographers needed a barrier to separate Utah from Canada and protect Montana from Washington, or vice versa. One explanation is that Idaho is a government-operated mind control vacuum. Another theory is that Idaho exists, but only as a state of mind. The whole debacle stirs up an abundance of very real philosophical arguments, but according to conspiracy logic, if you feel like you're living in Idaho right now, odds are it is simply the result of other conspiracies at work. Now personally, I don't believe this one, but there are some people who really full-heartedly believe it. Here at number 7, Charlie. The legend of Charlie the lake monster was first recorded in the early 1920s when railroad workers in McCall saw something unexplainable. In McCall, locals will tell you the tale of this creature. Charlie has been known as Slimy Slim and the Twilight Dragon of Payette Lake. Over the years, this serpent-like creature with a dragon head has made many appearances. Most think it's a log before it rises up to reveal its head. The last documented sighting came in 2002, but in 1954, the Payette Lake Star newspaper held a contest challenging readers to come up with a name for this elusive creature. The winner was Leigh Isle Hennefer of Springfield, who came up with the name Charlie. Charlie continued to be spotted over the years, but it has been seen less and less frequently. It is reported to be between 10 and 50 feet long, brownish green, having a shell, and travels in serpent-like waves, rising and falling out of the water. But this gentle beast garners nothing but love from locals, who can't seem to recall an incident when Charlie attacked any of the lakeside city's residents. Very much like the Loch Ness Monster, except the Loch Ness Monster doesn't get as much love, and it seems like every place has its own version of a monster in a body of water. Number 6. Idaho is purposely drugging its residences. In 1947, it's said that Lewiston began adding fluoride into its water, as did the vast majority of United States cities, a practice which still exists today. Many suspected, however, that the addition of fluoride, which is approved as an easy way to cut down on widespread tooth decay, was in fact a large-scale attempt to underhandedly medicate Idaho's citizens, as well as a means of covering up the drastic lack of dental care provided for the state's working people who were poor. The dramatic decrease in childhood cavity levels recorded by 1950 supported the practice as a whole, but to this day, fluoride is still majorly opposed for a variety of reasons, including links to cancer and bone loss. Halfway at number 5, Lake Pend. This deep ocean-like lake in northern Idaho is said to be the perfect place for a monstrous beast to reside. It is said to be large, gray, and prehistoric in shape and size. Locals claim he is an unknown remnant of the Jurassic era that has managed to survive extinction, against all odds. Up until this point, the creature has remained a peaceful part of local lore, although many say that sightings of the sea creature were merely glimpses of Naval Training Station's top-secret submarine and technological testing. Coming in at number 4, Civic Theater. Before this building housed the Lewiston Civic Theater, it was a Methodist church built in 1904. In 1972, it became a theater, and in 1982, 2 women and 1 man all mysteriously disappeared from the theater on the same night. Both women were found unfortunately deceased off of the property 2 years later, suspected to be victims of a homicide. The man, however, was never found, and his mystery remains unsolved. Whether or not these 3 people haunt the building, there have been numerous sightings of other ghosts in the theater. Actors and theatergoers have seen apparitions of a red-haired man, a spectacled presence in the mailroom, and an elderly gentleman in the doorway. A ghost of a director has been seen in the balcony, and apparently a bride weaves herself through the seats. Here at number 3, Massacre Rocks Water Babies. This one comes from Pocatello, where you can hear the crying of babies late at night if you sit by the river alone in the dark. Many believe that it's the sound of babies that mothers were forced to take the lives of during a famine rather than watch them starve till they passed away. Some think that these babies grew gills and learned to survive. Depending on the story you hear, a water baby is said to be a spirit or monster traditionally seen as a Native American bred urban legend of small childlike creatures living in the waters of reservations around the western United States. It is rumored that they are tricksters whose main goal is to take the lives of others. Coming in at number 2, the Murder House. The Murder House of Boys was the site of the vicious passing of Preston Murr more than 30 years ago. After an argument broke out in the basement of the house between Murr and 2 men, Murr was shot and then hacked into pieces that were dumped 100 miles away from Brownlee Reservoir. His body parts surfaced and led investigators back to the house, which is allegedly still haunted today. Many former residents and visitors of the house have said that the basement has a very creepy feeling. Even footsteps from an invisible person have been heard. There are also legends about the house that say bloodstains appear and then disappear, and a woman in old-fashioned clothing has been seen looking out the window.
Now the rumor is that this 21-year-old man will forever haunt this home, and even non-believers believe it's created an urban legend.
Living there, I really don't feel that I was never afraid or felt that it was haunted, but there are so many stories. I mean, everybody's convinced that it is.
Now here at our number 1 spot, the Phantom Jogger of Canyon Hill. At Cadwell's Canyon Hill Cemetery, it's said that the ghosts don't like when you stare at their graves late at night. According to the legend, if you park between the 2 trees across the street from the entrance at midnight, you will see something quite terrifying. Make sure to turn your lights off though, so you can see the legless jogger when she knocks on your window. After you've completely freaked out and almost totally lost your mind, she leaves just as quickly as she came. Someone has said that they parked in this spot to investigate, but they did it at noon, so it wasn't very dark. They said they didn't see any ghosts, but that it was still very creepy.
At our number 10 spot, we have Big Nose George. Born in March 1834, George Pear, more so known as Big Nose George, was a big-time cattle rustler and a highwayman, so in other words, he was up to no good. Then in 1878, him and his gang went on to murder 2 law enforcement officers, and immediately after, every authority figure in Wyoming was after this guy. While he was on the run, he did the great decision to separate from his group members, which is a really smart smart idea. But Big Nose George had a big mouth. When he was on the run, he decided to hit up a small bar in Miles City, Montana, and here they would get extremely drunk and boast to others in the bar that they did in fact kill 2 law enforcement officers in Wyoming. Eventually, he was arrested. In prison, he would try to plan an escape only to be met with failure. When news broke out about his attempt to escape, an angry mob of around 200 people rushed into the jail and decided to take his life. After passing, doctors Thomas McGee and John Osborne took his body to study the chemistry of a criminal. Here they would cut out a portion of his head to investigate his brain, but no part went to waste. The cap of his head was used for an ashtray, pen holder, and a doorstop. It didn't stop there though. They then skinned him and then sent the skin to a tannery where he was literally made into a pair of shoes and then a medical bag. What the actual? Number 9, Pedro Mountain's mummy. The Shoshone Indians of Wyoming believed in a race of tiny people and said that they were responsible for the deaths of their comrades with the use of poisonous arrows. They described this race of people to stand from 20 inches to 3 feet tall. These people were known to be very hostile, not only to the natives, but to their own kind. It was said that they would take the life of their own people if they became too sick and couldn't help the community anymore. So basically, if you're old, you're dead. After years and years, there was no solid evidence of these little people until 1932, a 14-inch fully formed mummy was found in the San Pedro Mountains near Casper, Wyoming. When they examined the object, they confirmed that it did have a real human remains inside, although it was unclear if it was a native child or if it was a race of little people. Eventually, the mummy would be passed on through different people, but all of them had one thing in common. They would be faced with extreme bad luck as soon as they possessed the mummy, which led many people to believe that it was cursed. It was passed on to a businessman named Yvonne Goodman, who passed away shortly after. Then it was passed on to another businessman, Leonard Walder, who also passed away only a year after having it. Now the whereabouts of the mummy are completely unknown. At number 8 spot, we have Ghost Ship of Plate River. If you visit the Pathfinder Dam on the North Plate River, there's a small chance you might find the glimpse of the ghost ship. It's believed that every 25 years, a death ship appears out of the midst near the dam. The first ever recorded sighting of this eerie vessel was in 1862, when a trapper named Leon Weber reported a large wave of fog, then saying it took the form of a sailing ship with a mast and sails covered in silvery shiny frost. He said he saw people on board, but they're all covered in this shiny frost. When he looked closer, he saw someone that looked exactly like his fiancée at the time as well. He then returned home from work a month later and discovered that his fiancée passed away the day he saw the ship. Then there was another sighting 25 years later in 1887 when cattleman Gene Wilson saw the exact frosty ship appear out of nowhere. He would also report people on board, but all of them were frozen, and as soon as he went home, he found out that his home was burned to ashes and his wife was lifeless 100 yards from the house. Number 7, Francis E. Warren Air Force Base. Located 3 miles west of Cheyenne, this Air Force Base was first established as Fort D.A. Russell in 1867. Named in honor of Civil War Brigadier General David A. Russell, it is the oldest continuously active military installation in the Air Force. Along with these old buildings, the legends are told that many of the old cavalry soldiers also continue to linger, often seen walking up the grounds or in the dormitories. Another story tells of a spirit that is said to harass female members of the security team. One of the most famous stories on the base takes place in Quarters 80, often referred as the Gus Quarters. During the early days, Quarters 80 was home to a young officer, but unfortunately for him, he was out on duty for the majority of the time, so one day he came home very exhausted and found a soldier entertaining his wife in their bedroom. The husband was furious and was looking to eliminate the man by any means necessary, but the soldier decided to make a decisive action and leap out the window. Instead of escaping, he accidentally hung himself by getting stuck on the clothesline outside of the home. Ever since this moment, the Gus Quarters are known for their supernatural activity, from objects being thrown across the room to just being grabbed out of nowhere. Number 6, the ghostly bride of Plains Hotel. In the Plains Hotel of Cheyenne, Wyoming, locals claim that there is a spirit of a bride that haunts everyone who steps in. Story goes that a lady named Rosie and her groom were on their honeymoon at the hotel. As the night went on, the husband decided to step out and get some drinks at a nearby bar. When Rosie arrived to fetch him, she noticed him walking upstairs with an escort. So of course she was shocked and decided to secretly follow them. This is when Rosie followed them all the way up to the room and in a jealous rage shot both of them with the husband's firearm, taking both of their lives immediately. After this, she would regret her actions and return back to the honeymoon suite to take her own life. Now, if you enter the Plain Hotel, you may be met with the apparitions of the 3 people involved in the story. Rosie walks down the halls with a bright blue dress, which would have been the dress for her wedding. In the hump for our list, we have the Devil's Tower. This 1,200-foot tower of rugged rock is known as the Devil's Tower. It is located in northeast Wyoming, and when you look closer in the area, there is nothing that even closely resembles this behemoth. It's very unique in nature as it has all these grooves surrounded all around the rock. Although these can be explained by natural phenomena like a former volcano, Native Americans around the area have a completely different belief. Many claim that back in the day the natives were being attacked by these gigantic bears, so to defend themselves they would go up the Devil's Tower and pray to the Great Spirit to save them. They claim this is why the tower had grooves, because it was from the bears trying to claw themselves up on it. Number 4, Wyoming Frontier Prison. Located in Rawlins, Wyoming, the Wyoming Frontier Prison has the reputation of being one of the toughest prisons in the Wild West. Opened in 1901, it housed some of the most violent inmates, featured a dungeon, botched executions, and was known for rampant violence. Now a museum, employees and visitors alike have reported ghostly encounters. There have been apparitions spotted in the cell blocks and reports of a malevolent spirit in the dungeon who has threatened visitors. The prison is so notorious that it was featured on an episode of Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures, and ghost hunters have captured orbs on camera, but let me know what you guys think about that. The museum offers haunted Halloween night tours if you want to have a ghostly encounter of your own. Number 3, Heart Mountain Relocation Center. Starting with an old building originally used for an irrigation project prior to the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Heart Mountain Relocation Center began construction on barracks and facilities to relocate American families of Japanese descent in June 1942. Over the next 3 years, the camp would house over 14,000 people. Just to put that into perspective, if they made this prison a town, it would be the 3rd largest city in Wyoming based on population alone. As World War II occurred, many horrors occurred within as well. Abuse, torture were just some of the things that the Japanese had to go through, with many people passing away as well. It eventually got shut down at the end of the war, but the discrimination towards the Japanese was too big that they couldn't let it go that easily. Today the camp has been reinvented to be an informational interpretive center, educating Americans about this dark time about our past. People working at the place claim to see these shadow people in the halls when it gets dark as well. Number 2, Old Faithful Inn. This is yet another story of a deadly wedding. I don't know what it is in Wyoming, but what's with all these bloody wedding stories? Are y'all not happy there? Built in 1903, Yellowstone's Old Faithful Inn is considered a National Historic Landmark. This of course means that it comes with some haunting tales. The Headless Bride of the Old Faithful Inn is the story of tragedy. A wealthy woman from back east fell in love with a con artist, told by her family that if she marries this man, they would disown her. She then took her inheritance and ran away with him. On their honeymoon in Yellowstone, he chopped off her head and ran away with her money long before they found the body. Now the Headless Bride has been spotted wandering the hotel in search of her lost love. All the way at our number 1 spot, we have the Sheridan Inn. The Sheridan Inn has been a community landmark for nearly 130 years. Miss Kate, one of the beloved employees and patrons, is said to have never left. In 1901, Miss Kate moved to Sheridan and began working at the inn. She moved into her room on the 3rd floor in 1906, where she would spend the rest of her life. A friend placed her ashes in the walls after her death in 1968, all while the inn was being renovated. She is now the innkeeper's guardian. You might feel her in a cold spot or have your lights turned on and off if you're at the inn.
Starting off this countdown at number 10, the Stanley Hotel. One of the most famous haunts of Colorado is the Stanley Hotel. The Stanley, which served as the basis for Stephen King's The Shining, is more than a century old and is home to countless ghost sightings and unexplainable events. Multiple witnesses have seen a face peering out of the window of room 407 when it was unoccupied. One witness staying in the room reported that a light kept turning off and on. Allegedly, the guests acknowledged the ghost, assured him that they'd only be staying 2 days, and asked him to keep the light on. The spirit left the light alone after that, but proceeded to spend the rest of the night noisily playing around with the elevator just outside the door. Rooms 217, 401, and 418 have unusually high reports of paranormal activity. Cleaning crews tell of strange noises and seeing impressions on the bed when the rooms were empty. Guests in room 418 report that the sounds of children playing in the hall, but when those reports came in, there were no children checked into the hotel. Number 9, the Black Forest Haunting. In the early 1990s, Steve Lee moved his family into a log cabin home in the Black Forest region of northern Colorado. They rented it for a year before purchasing it, but once the land was theirs, things started getting weird. Initially, lights and electronic devices kept turning off and on, and eerie noises sometimes filled the air. This was followed by a strange odor that wafted through the cabin that burned the family's throats and eyes. Thinking these happenings were the work of pranksters, the Lee family installed motion detectors and cameras. However, the motion detectors would go off when nothing seemed to be happening on the cameras. Steve Lee added more cameras capturing more unexplainable phenomenon like orbs, beams of light, and sometimes ghostly forms with faces. The Lees could no longer pretend the cameras were the problem, and they contacted the show sightings to document what became one of the most famous hauntings in America. The sightings crew experienced and captured quite a bit of phenomena themselves. Cameras were knocked off tripods, one of their producers experienced an attempted possession, and a medium working with them determined there were multiple spirits in the house and a rift in space and time on the property. Number 8. The Vampire's Grave. European lore is rich in tales of vampires, yet one of those creatures may have found themselves in a small town in Colorado. Theodore Glava was a Transylvanian immigrant who moved to Colorado and became a coal miner. Legend says that the man was tall and pale with a dark coat and long fingernails. In 1918, he passed away of the flu and was buried in the local cemetery, where some say they have seen his figure lurking at night. Some say that the tree guarding Glava's grave grew from the stake that was hammered into his heart post-mortem. Number 7. Butch Cassidy's Lost Gold. Butch Cassidy was one of the most infamous outlaws in Wild West history, and his life allegedly ended in a shootout in 1908, but it's said that he left behind mementos of his acclaimed career. According to the rumors, Cassidy reportedly stashed thousands of dollars worth of gold in a hideout in an unassuming Irish canyon. If this is true, the gold may still be there to this day. Should you ever visit the Irish Canyon, keep a careful eye out and you may be the one to discover Cassidy's hidden treasure. Number 6. Route 666. The infamous Route 666, nicknamed the Devil's Highway, runs through Colorado. It was renumbered as Route 491 in 2003 in hopes of dispelling the fear surrounding the demonic numbers. However, changing the numbers didn't take away the unexplainable phenomena that occurred, and is still occurring on this cursed road. When it was still known as Route 666, this stretch of highway had an unusually high accident rate. People driving along the Devil's Highway have reported creepy incidences, such as a black Phantom sedan that follows dangerously close no matter how high the speed. Many have pulled over only to realize that there's no car behind them. There are also tales of a pack of hellhounds that terrorize innocent travelers. The beasts somehow manage to keep up with the vehicle regardless of how fast or recklessly the driver maneuvers the car. Many believe these hellhounds are responsible for shredding tires and causing terrible wrecks. Some have even claimed that the beasts are capable of jumping into the windows and mauling people. Halfway. Number 5. The Riverdale Road. Riverdale Road runs through Thornton and is lined with creepy cottonwood trees, where you can allegedly see hanging bodies by the light of the full moon. A Camaro with no driver can also be spotted winding down the stretch of road. Riverdale Road also has its own Lady in White legend. Reportedly, visitors have seen this strange woman in their rearview mirror. Locals believe that she is a ghost who is looking for the spirits of her deceased children. Number 4. The Gates of Hell. According to local legend, the Gates of Hell lies near Riverdale Road in Thornton. Rumor has it that the stretch of road leads to rusted iron gates that open to a place of satanic worship and human sacrifices. Behind these gates also rest the charred ruins of an old mansion that leads directly to hell, people say. The mansion was built by David Woolpett during the gold rush. Over the years, the structure was used as a brothel, cowboy saloon, and a hippie commune before it was burned down in 1975. It's said that a man living in the mansion took his family's lives before setting the home on fire. This dark story has led people to believe that the grounds of the mansion are portals to the underworld. Number 3. The Hotel Colorado. The guests of the Hotel Colorado are often awoken in the night by strange sounds and flickering lights. Some are plagued by sightings of a little girl wearing a Victorian-era dress, while others recount how their personal items were moved around or missing. Both bell tower suites are reportedly haunted, and the elevator seems to have a mind of its own at times. Stories tell of a female presence that has a habit of watching male guests as they sleep. The screams of a woman can also often be heard throughout the hotel, believed to belong to a deceased chambermaid. According to the lore, she was involved in a love triangle which ended with one of her lovers taking her life in one of the guest rooms, and her former room has been turned into a storage space because the paranormal activity within the room was said to be too intense to remain open to the public. Number 2. The Ridge Home Asylum. Every state has an abandoned asylum story, and this is Colorado's. Ridge Home admitted its first patient in 1912, and from there began a history full of controversy. Many of the home's residences were admitted despite still being mentally capable, but over time their mental states declined due to their confinement. Rumors that patients were unnecessarily medicated arose, and over time parts of the building closed due to unsafe living conditions. Finally, in 1992, the doors of Ridge Home Asylum closed for good, but that doesn't change the fact that the legend that some patients were mistreated there and passed away still remains to haunt people who try to explore the abandoned building. Now coming in at number 1, Hatchet Lady of Red Rocks. Red Rocks is a staple of Colorado and is a big deal for people who live there. But what if I told you it's home to some eerie and paranormal tales? Would you still want to see your favorite band play there, even when there's something lurking in the shadows watching your every move? Yeah, probably not. One of the more popular and well-known legends surrounding Red Rocks is that of the Hatchet Lady. She wasn't always known as the Hatchet Lady though. In fact, many stories say that this woman, old Mrs. Johnson, would pull a coat over her head and carry around a hatchet in order to ward off her daughter's suitors. Apparently, she wasn't a fan of young love. She of course has tales that make her into a headless ghost, that scare off couples who are getting a little too intimate in the shadows. Other myths believe that this Hatchet Lady was a homeless woman who lived in the area, like in a nearby cave in the 1950s, and instead of going after young lovers, she'd go after children. Any young kids who ended up a little too close for their liking would be executed, and she'd hide their bodies and severed limbs around the grounds. So word of advice, don't stray too far from the marked paths and stick together. Starting off at number 10, the Voodoo Caves. Located in the Beaver Dam Mountains is a pipe known as the Voodoo Caves. According to local lore practitioners of dark magic performed countless rituals inside the pipe, leaving behind an evil residual energy that curses or takes the lives of those who enter. It's believed if anyone within the cave insults Satan or makes any derogatory remarks about the entity that lurks there, they will find themselves trapped inside by rising water. The malevolent force got the blame for the passing of a worker who went inside the underground pipe to remove a clog when he got pinned down and drowned. Now at number 9, Bear Lake Monster. The urban legend of the Bear Lake Monster goes back to at least 1868, when Desert News reporter Joseph C. Rich ran a series about the serpent-like creature. The series quoted many well-known citizens who all claimed they'd seen the monster. However, in 1888, Mr. Rich admitted that he'd made all the stories up. The legend continues, however. Every so often, someone does claim they have seen the Bear Lake creature, which coincidentally resembles the Loch Ness Monster legend in Scotland. Here at number 8, the legend of Lillian Gray. In the middle of Salt Lake City Cemetery sits a gravestone reading Lily E. Gray, June 6, 1881 to November 14, 1958. Accompanied by the very ominous phrase, "Victim of the Beast 666. Lillian remains a mystery, and her headstone forms the source of wild tales of her being a sacrifice to Satan, or that she herself was a Satanist. Some have speculated that she was another innocent woman accused of witchcraft. Another theory, because Utah is clearly full of ominous places, proposes she died on Highway 666, which is also one of the country's most infamously dangerous freeways. Coming in at number 7, Skinwalker Ranch. The Sherman Ranch in Ballard, Utah is better known to locals and paranormal investigators as the Skinwalker Ranch, or the UFO Ranch. The name comes from the alarming number of alleged skinwalker sightings and reports of paranormal and UFO-related phenomena. The 40-acre ranch borders the Indian reservation and has a history of mutilated cattle, spirit orbs, unidentified objects hovering in the sky, and what's been described as a large, red-eyed beast similar to the Native American depictions of skinwalkers, half-human, half-animal monstrosities. Now coming in at number 6, the ghost of Red Lopez. In early 1915, Bingham miners began hearing a voice, supposedly the ghost of Rafael Red Lopez. According to an article in the February 2nd, 1915 edition of the Ogden Daily Standard, Lopez was a miner who shot and took the life of another miner in November 1913. He also reportedly took the life of Bingham's police chief and 2 sheriff deputies in an ambush later that day. A week later, he then reportedly took the lives of 2 other deputies during a manhunt for him that lasted into 1914. But Lopez was never found or heard from again in Utah. It's still one of the state's largest crime mysteries that wasn't closed until 2003. Back in 1915, the report stated that the workers began to be terrorized during the past few days by the shoutings of a gloomy voice in an area of the mine where 2 of the deputies passed away. Halfway at number 5, teen in a tanning bed. The urban legend about the bride cooking herself in a tanning bed circulated all over the country, but it allegedly originated in Utah with a teenage girl. The story begins with a 17-year-old winning a trip to Hawaii, and naturally she wanted to get bronzed before her trip. Though limits exist for how long and how often you can sit in these tanning beds, the girl, however, supposedly found a way around this rule by hopping around town to town to different salons, 4 to be exact, in just one afternoon. She eventually ended up in Utah Valley Regional Medical Center because her internal organs were shutting down and she went blind from cooking herself all day. Now, a reminder, this one is just an urban legend. Now at number 4, the Lady in Purple. Over the years, many people have claimed to have seen a woman dressed in purple who appears angry or unhappy inside the Rio Grande Depot in Salt Lake City. In 2017, Rio Grande Cafe manager Colleen Murphy told KSL-TV she has seen lights come on at night in a locked room at the bottom of a stairwell with nobody seemingly there to turn them on. She also said that she had been locked out of the building on multiple occasions late at night, with no real explanation. Others have told her they've heard singing at night, coming from the woman's bathroom in the depot, even when the building is seemingly empty. As the legend goes, the woman tossed her engagement ring onto the tracks during an argument with her fiancé at the depot. Deciding she had made a mistake, she jumped down to retrieve the ring when she was struck and unfortunately passed away by an oncoming train. Now at number 3, the inmate. Salt Lake Herald-Republican on January 8, 1905 reported a frightening tale from the Salt Lake City jail. 2 women at the jail reported they had seen a ghost there, walking the halls at night. The ghost was a man who wore a slouch hat pulled over his eyes and would peer through the grating in the building. They told the newspaper that the ghost was that of a former inmate who had died there in a gruesome manner. On one particular night, one of the women said that she heard a ghost noise by a door, then walked up and asked if it was indeed the dead inmate. "Ain't you dead?" she asked. By way of reply, the ghost began to prance up and down the narrow hallway, swinging his arms and smiling, laughing, and shaking his head. While they never saw the man the day he died, they told the newspaper they were convinced it was him. Now at number 2, the Devil's Highway, kinda like what we mentioned before. The highway system, originally named Route 666 and nicknamed the Devil's Highway, crossed through an area of the United States known as the Four Corners, the meeting space of Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. All 4 states have reported paranormal experiences while on this stretch of highway. Tales range from hellhounds chasing alongside cars and slashing tires, to skinwalkers shifting from animal to man before their very eyes, to an evil shaman who appears in the backseat to steal the driver's soul. Like many roads, Highway 666 also hosts a ghostly hitchhiker, a mysterious young woman in a nightgown walking the road alone. When someone tries to offer her a ride, she vanishes. A popular legend attached to the Devil's Highway is that of a mad trucker, a phantom semi-truck that terrorizes late-night drivers before disappearing. One witness reported her husband's experience. Allegedly, he was driving on Route 666 one night when a semi-truck began heading straight for him down the middle of the highway. He said the truck had to have been going around 130 miles per hour, with sparks and flames flying up from the wheels. He pulled off the road in time to miss what he thought would be a fiery collision, and the beast of a vehicle took off into the night. Now coming in at number 1, the haunted Old Main. Everyone who has passed through the Southern Utah University campus has heard the lore of Virginia Loomis and Old Main, a building on the university's campus. As the legend goes, Virginia Loomis's life was taken in the late 1800s. Her body was discovered on the boulder used to make many of the bricks to construct the Cedar City building in 1898. It's said some of the bricks even contain her blood. Later in life, a janitor was hired at the university. On his first day of work, he was allegedly lighting the old coal furnace in Old Main's basement when something caused the furnace door to slam shut on his arm. He was supposedly burned until he passed away, unable to get free, becoming the human torch that burned Old Main to the ground in 1948. It's said that the ghost of Virginia was seen laughing in the flames, and Virginia was written on the janitor's skull.
At our number 10 spot, we have the Candy Lady. In the early 1900s, children in the rural town of Terrell, Texas started to go missing. Some of the residents blamed it on the Candy Lady. The story says that she would go around leaving candy on children's home windows just before bedtime. As the parents began to fall asleep, it'll encourage children to grab the candy, but as they try to grab it, the lady grabs them and feasts on their sugar-laden blood until there isn't any left. A farmer allegedly found rotten teeth on his farm and later found the body of a boy with his pockets stuffed with candy. Many people believe that Candy Lady is in fact real and went by the name of Clara Crane. Clara Crane was accused of poisoning her husband back in 1895 with poison-laced caramel candies. But that's not all. 5 years before the incident, Crane's 5-year-old daughter passed away from unknown causes, which many believe that she poisoned her daughter as well. At a number 9 spot, we have La Llorona. This legend originates from El Paso, Texas. Almost all Latin cultures know the story of La Llorona, and the people of El Paso are no exception to that. La Llorona directly translates to the weeping woman, which perfectly describes the behavior of this malevolent spirit. She is said to haunt the riverbanks of the Rio Grande, where she is searching for her 2 children whom she had already drowned in that very river. Now there are many iterations of the story, but I'll just mention the most popular one. The legend goes that a lady found her boyfriend with another woman. After a heated argument between the two, the woman was heartbroken and wanted to get revenge, so she took the children and proceeded to drown them in the Rio Grande River in Texas. It's also said that when she was done throwing her children into the river, she went back to her lover's home with a bloody wedding gown, showing her she would do whatever it took to be with him. It's said to be the reason why many children disappear in that very area, and she supposedly takes other children to fill the void she lost. So if you're in the area, beware of a woman weeping in a wedding gown who is sitting by the Rio Grande. At a number 8 spot, El Cucuy. This creature is known as South Texas' official boogeyman. There are many versions of El Cucuy since it already originates in Mexico as well. It's said that this monster kidnaps children who misbehave and takes them back to the mountain where he lives to devour them. He appears as a hairless creature with an enormous head that dwarfs his spider-like body. He also has these large red glowing eyes, red ears to hear everything, and razor sharp fangs and claws to accompany that. The origin of El Cucuy goes that a man was suffering suffering with tuberculosis. Desperate to cure himself, he fetched an African witch doctor. The doctor told him to drink a child's blood, but as he did, he started to turn into the monster described. Ever since, he has a never-ending thirst for children's blood. At our number 7, we have the Screaming Bridge. In North Arlington, Texas, 50 years ago, there was a group of teenage girls driving home from a football game. The bridge was designed to only fit one car at a time, and I know, what a dumb bridge, but this was in the past and I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. The girls weren't paying attention and went full speed over the bridge until a car with no headlights struck them head on, with all of the girls passing away. Some say when they go near the bridge, they can hear the distant screams sounding like the girls before they passed away. As well, if you go over the bridge and look down at the water below, you can see the tombstones of all the girls with their names and birthdays written on it. At number 6 spot, we have the Goatman's Bridge. Why are there so many haunted bridges? Like, I don't get it. But in Denton County, Texas, lies the Goatman's Bridge, which was built in 1884. This bridge is supposedly haunted by the ghost of the Goatman. The story goes that a black goat farmer named Oscar Washburn was renowned for quality meat, milk, and cheeses, and then he moved with his family just north of the bridge. Except when he arrived in this area, he was instantly the target of racial hate crime. The racist townfolk came together and burned down the farm with the family inside. They then threw Oscar's body over that very bridge. Now he appears as a half goat, half man humanoid that reeks of decaying flesh. If you knock on the bridge 3 times, it said that you can summon the Goatman, but now others use this area for rituals and other supernatural activities. Right in the hump of our list, we have the Lady of White Rock Lake. The lake is located in Dallas, Texas, and many visitors claim that they spot a drenched young woman who appears crawling out of the water or asking to fetch a ride. When many people offer her this ride, she disappears out of thin air and leaves a bloody, wet seat mark and a terrified driver. Even though many of the drivers were scared to their core, some decide to go to the address given to them by the girl. When they arrive at the door, they're all met by the same man who tells them that his daughter had gone sailing and never came back. Many people believe the story is inspired by the 1953 book Neiman Marcus, Texas, the story of the Proud Dallas Store, and according to the book, Malloy and his wife are driving home late one night in East Dallas when a young, beautiful blonde girl ghost appears on the road. Her elegant dresses is naturally wet and she seems to be in trouble. She gives them an address on Gaston Avenue and asks them to be taken home, but as they drive, she disappears, leaving only a mark. At our number 4 spot, we have the Lake Worth Monster. You just learned about the Goatman, right? Well, this is basically the Goatman, but of the lake. This monster terrorized the people of the town for years, with many describing the creature as being 7 feet tall, around 300 pounds, long-necked, flop-eared, pot-bellied, covered in white scales and hair. I swear I just described Shaquille O'Neal. The monster was supposedly captured on camera, but you guys be the judge of that one. It looks like a 2-year-old drew on a camera lens on a potato with a crayon and then took this photo. But who knows, it might be real. This beast was inspired by Sally Ann Clark's book, The Lake Worth Monster of Greer Lake, Fort Worth, Texas. In the book, the monster jumped on the hood of someone's car and shook up the car so badly that they got caught in a bad accident. The people described it being a 7 feet tall being covered in scales and fur and resembled a half goat and half man. Pretty scary if you ask me. All the way at our number 3 spot, we have the Donkey Lady. The Donkey Lady of San Antonio, Texas dates all the way back in the late 1800s. The Donkey Lady was once a beautiful woman with children and a husband, but one day in a rage, the husband burned down the house with the children and wife still inside. The children passed away, but however, the wife managed to survive, but suffered greatly from this. Her toes and fingers would be fused together in a hoove-like way, and her face was melted and sagging, inspiring the Donkey Lady name. There's a bridge in South San Antonio named the Old Applewhite Bridge or the Donkey Lady Bridge. This is the bridge she went to crown after this horrible tragedy. Now it said if you go to the bridge after midnight and call it the Donkey Lady, she'll appear just before you. Some have claimed she had run at people who call out her name, or sometimes just stalks in the forest line waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. At number 2 spot, we have the girl who danced with the devil. The story takes place in the 1970s in San Antonio, Texas, with a young Mexican girl named Rosa. One day the girl wanted to attend a dance at a nearby nightclub named the El Cabroncito. However, the parents were very strict and didn't want her anywhere near the nightclub. Despite their orders, she snuck out of her house and traveled all the way to the nightclub where she could finally have her dance. At the club, Rosa was approached by this very tall, charming, and well-dressed man who asked her permission to dance. When they began dancing, Rosa was terrified when she discovered he had goat hooves instead of feet. When she screamed in terror, people in the club started to chase him out, but as he got close, he vanished out of thin air, leaving a trail of smoke and the smell of sulfur. Double activity if that wasn't enough. It's said that the area surrounding the nightclub still smells of sulfur to this day. At our number 1 spot with El Muerto. El Muerto, otherwise known as the Headless Horseman of Texas, is a Texas legend that dates all the way back in the mid-1800s. The story goes that 2 rangers, Creed Taylor and William Bigfoot Wallace, were hunting a criminal known as Vidal along the Mexican border. Vidal had been wreaking havoc all across the state of Texas, so when the ranger caught them, they wanted to set an example. So they did just that and cut his head clean off. They then tied his head to the saddle out and sent his horse with the headless body running off into the night. Now the horse continued to explore the region with its headless rider. The tale of El Muerto began to grow after it was reported that both had been seen numerous times and that gunshots had no impact on either of them. Spotting El Muerto was thought to foreshadow bad luck because everyone who claimed to have seen him was struck with a series of bad luck and poor health following it. At our number 10 spot, we have the Seven Sisters Road. Located in southeast Nebraska, just outside of Nebraska City, is a road that locals call Seven Sisters Road. And if you're trying to find this on a map, it will be named L Street. But I wouldn't recommend taking a road trip down this place. Legend goes that a man had an argument with his parents and his 7 sisters. It got to a point when his whole family hated him and he looked to seek revenge. So one day he waited in the woods outside of his home and waited for his parents to leave. After he forced or baited his sisters one by one outside of the house, he would end up hanging each and every single one of them where this road is situated today. Then eventually a road would be built on this path of the trees, causing them to be shut down. Ever since the construction of the road, this road is said to be haunted by the 7 sisters who were executed. Many who have driven through the area report having problems with their cars stalling, headlights mysteriously dimming, speedometers freezing, and windows that roll up and down seemingly on their own. At our number 9 spot, we have Alliance Theater. On the east side of Nebraska is one of the most iconic buildings in the state, and that is the Alliance Theater. This was built back in 1903, starting off as a hotel, but in 1938, it was then rebranded into Imperial Theater until it switched to the name Alliance. It would host many different performing arts, but it said a few performers passed away inside of the theater. Some were caused by accidents, such as an actress named Mary who passed away after a piece of lightning equipment fell on her. Now, over the years over its existence, many workers at the theater have reported their own ghostly tales. Some include whispers as if someone's right behind them and shadow figures walking around, and some are even seen performing. Even in 2002, the owner Gerald Bullard had said to reporters that, quote, "If the theater is actually haunted, then the ghosts are very friendly." It still remains open to this day, and many visitors claim to see the spirit of Mary. At our number 8 spot, we have Blackbird Hill. North of Decatur, Nebraska is a hill overlooking the Missouri River, and this hill is said to be infested with spirits. One notorious spirit that most visitors spot is of a young lady who could be screaming near the cliff. Legend goes that in 1840, a young couple in the area fell in love. This relationship carried both of them through school, but soon after they were done, the boy decided to travel abroad. His initial plan was to travel the world, then come back and marry the girl. But after a few months, the man never ended up returning back home. Months turned into years, and eventually the devastated girl gave up and married another man. The new couple then decided to move to a small cabin to what is now Blackbird Hill. And this is when the girl spotted her ex-fiance walking up to the cabin. She was shocked and then confessed a love for the man and went back home to tell her new fiance that she wanted to leave him and have a divorce. The new fiance got very angry and in a rage took her to the nearby cliff and proceeded to jump off together. The ex-fiance arrived, but just too late, only to hear the agonizing scream of his former wife. This occurred on October 17th, and many visitors gather up in this day because it said that you can still hear her screams down the cliff. At our number 7 spot, we have the Poison Girl at Centennial Hall. Built in 1897 in Valentine, Nebraska, is the historic Centennial Hall. It functions now as a 12-room museum, but before it was originally built to be a high school for the kids in the area. Then in 1947, a young female student was murdered inside of the school. She passed away after playing on her clarinet. This caused everyone to suspect that someone had intentionally poisoned her clarinet reed. Ever since the incident, the school is haunted by this little girl. The teachers will report her in their classrooms after school times, and this would accompany the feeling of dread. Other visitors and students report to hear her clarinet being played in a very ominous way. Now as a museum, visitors still report this little girl roaming the halls. She is said to have tugged on people's clothing as well as placing her clarinet on many of the artifacts inside of the museum in hopes that someone will play it and be poisoned like she was. At number 6 spot, we have radioactive hornets. Although this theory is debunked, it was a crazy one when it was first released in the media because many people didn't know how radiation worked and whatever they said about it would just scare you. Story goes that after the nuclear disasters following World War II in the 1940s, Japan's Fukushima nuclear plant created a giant mutant killer hornet due to their exposure to radiation. The hornets were said to have grown 4 times their size and were reproducing exponentially. Then one year in Nebraska, it was reported that many people were passing away with stings and swelling on their bodies, which led many people to place a blame on radioactive hornet. Again, this is just a myth and no radiation didn't cause overgrown killer hornets. hornets. But still, these large Japanese hornets do exist, and they go by the name of Asian giant hornet. At a number 5 spot, we have the Bailey House Museum. This red brick house in Brownsville was built just after the Civil War by Unison officer Captain Benson M. Bailey. He, alongside his wife, lived in this house for many years until financial depression hit, causing them to move away. This relocation would eventually place them in a more dangerous area, leading to their eventual murders. Their murders were never solved, but many claim that it was the fault of a jealous neighbor who poisoned the two in order to get their property. Whatever happened, what is known is that the spirit of Captain Benson Bailey is said to lurk the home to this day. He is said to slam doors open and shut in the house in order to display his dominance, and when he's agitated, he will swing them back and forth until you just stop doing whatever it is that he doesn't like. Others have reported seeing the man himself walking the halls and even standing up against the doors motionlessly. At a number 4 spot, we have Hummel Park. Despite being a beautiful park in appearance, there is a much darker story to it that makes you think twice before stepping foot here. This area is said to be the place where many lynchings, hangings, and satanic rituals were performed, and some believe they are happening to this day deep within the woods of the park. A stairway in the park has been called the Stairs to Hell because it is reported that it's impossible to count the same number of steps ascending the stairs as it is descending the stairs. Other than the fact that this place is covered in satanic graffiti, this place is just one of those places you shouldn't test out. You know? Just in case. At a number 3 spot, we have Walgren Lake Monster. Just west of Nebraska is the Walgren Lake, and this body of water is said to hold a 40 to 100 feet beast. Witnesses have said it looks like an alligator that has 2 front legs and a flipper on its back. Others have said it has a serpentine body, which closely resembles the Loch Ness Monster. But I swear, everyone everywhere believes they have the Loch Ness Monster in their area, or is that just me? It's said that you'll know this monster is near is that when you smell a hard stench of rotting flesh. The first written record of this monster is from a 1922 issue of the Hay Springs News. The following year, a local man named J.A. Johnson described the monster in an interview with the Omaha World Herald. According to the report, Johnson and his 2 friends were camping on the banks of the lake when they noticed a creature about 60 feet away. The men claimed that as soon as the beast saw them, it belted out a huge roar, whipped around, and plunged beneath the muddy lake water. At number 2 spot, we have the Ball Cemetery. Ball Cemetery is a cemetery in Springfield, Nebraska that was first used during the 19th century by pioneers. There is only one way in and one way out, and trespassers have been greeted by a caretaker with a shotgun who lives nearby. But instead of the caretaker keeping people out of his cemetery, it's more like he's trying to stop them from entering a place that is cursed. For decades, it has been said that this dark and lonely plot of land in the middle of nowhere is haunted by mysterious entities that defy rational explanation. Tall male apparitions sometimes attack nighttime visitors, and a female ghost laughs, speaks, and tugs on people's clothing. Photographs taken here often contain anomalies which believers swear are evidence of ghostly presences. All the way at a number 1 spot, we have the Hatchet House. In the town of Portal, there is a 1-room schoolhouse that held a very gruesome murder. Legend says that back in the early 1900s, a teacher snapped at her students after they were misbehaving for hours. She had already been having problems back at home as well, so this was her final straw. Except this would be a little bit too brutal for our liking. She would then proceed to lock the door to the classroom and pull out a rusty hatchet from underneath her desk. From here, she would decapitate every single student in the class, and then she took their heads and placed them on top of each of their desks. And it gets worse, so I apologize. She then carved out their hearts and brought them over to a nearby bridge to throw them down below one by one.